The rain poured heavily that evening, tapping against the window as Sarah sat alone in the living room, her fingers nervously tracing the edges of a photo frame. Inside was a picture of her and Emma, identical faces beaming at the camera, arms slung around each other's shoulders. They had always been close, so close that people often joked they were two halves of the same soul. But tonight, that bond felt like a cruel reminder of everything she had lost. Across the room, her phone buzzed with messages from Jack, but she couldn't bring herself to read them. His words no longer felt like they belonged to her. Her mind raced back to the moment it all unraveled. It was Emma's birthday, and Sarah had spent hours planning the perfect dinner at her home, where Jack had joined them after work. The night had started warm and joyful, with Emma laughing at Sarah's terrible jokes and Jack chiming in with compliments about her cooking. But as the evening went on, Sarah began to notice the subtle glances exchanged between Jack and Emma. At first, she dismissed it as paranoia, chalking it up to her overthinking nature. Yet, there was an odd shift in the air, something unspoken passing between them that Sarah couldn't quite put her finger on. It was later that week when Sarah stumbled upon the undeniable truth. Jack had left his phone on the kitchen counter while he stepped out to answer the door. A message notification lit up the screen, and Sarah's heart sank as she read the preview. "Last night was unforgettable. Can't stop thinking about you." Her fingers trembled as she unlocked the phone, scrolling through a thread of messages that revealed the depth of their betrayal. Jack and Emma, her husband and her twin. The two people she trusted the most in the world had been hiding something so cruel, so unthinkable, right under her nose. Her chest tightened as anger and disbelief consumed her. The sound of the door opening barely registered in her mind until Jack walked in, holding a package. His smile faded instantly as he saw her standing there, his phone clutched in her hand. "Sarah," he began, his voice low and panicked. "I can explain." But Sarah wasn't ready to hear excuses. "Explain what, Jack?" she snapped, holding up the phone. "Explain how you could betray me with her? My sister?" She had never seen him so pale, his usual confidence replaced by a stammering attempt to justify himself. It's not what you think," he muttered, avoiding her gaze. But the evidence was clear, and the words he struggled to form only confirmed her worst fears. She felt the room spinning as tears blurred her vision. Memories of Emma flooded her mind, the shared birthdays, whispered secrets, and promises of always having each other's backs. How could she? How could they? In that moment, Sarah's world felt like it had shattered into pieces too jagged to ever fit together again. Jack reached out, his hand trembling, but Sarah recoiled as if his touch burned. "Don't," she said, her voice breaking. The pain in her chest made it hard to breathe, but anger surged through her veins, giving her strength she didn't know she had. "You don't get to explain. You don't get to justify this. Not after what you've done." Her words were sharp, cutting through the silence, but Jack's pleading eyes only made her feel sicker. "Sarah, please," he said, his voice desperate. "It was a mistake. I was confused. It didn't mean anything." Those words, "it didn't mean anything," felt like a slap to the face. Her sister, her own flesh and blood, reduced to a meaningless fling? The betrayal wasn't just in the act itself, but in the sheer disregard for the relationships that once held her world together. She shook her head, her eyes narrowing. "You don't just mistake your way into betraying your wife. You don't accidentally destroy trust, Jack." He opened his mouth to respond, but Sarah didn't wait to hear it. She pushed past him, storming into the bedroom and slamming the door behind her. The sound echoed through the house, but it wasn't enough to drown out the sound of her heart pounding. She leaned against the door, her chest heaving, as the weight of what she had just uncovered threatened to crush her. Her hands shook as she tried to steady herself, but her mind kept replaying the image of those messages, the words that seemed to mock her naivety. The room felt suffocating, filled with memories of happier times that now felt like lies. She looked at the bed where she and Jack had shared countless laughs and dreams. How many of those moments had been tainted? How long had he been looking at her sister that way? The questions swirled in her head, each one more painful than the last. Her phone buzzed again, pulling her attention back to the present. This time, it wasn't Jack. It was Emma. The sight of her name on the screen made Sarah's stomach churn. She let the call go unanswered, but the phone lit up again almost immediately. Unable to ignore it, Sarah grabbed the phone and answered with a sharp, "What do you want?" "Sarah, I need to explain," Emma's voice stammered, thick with what sounded like tears. "Explain what, Emma?" Sarah's tone was ice cold. "Explain how you thought it was okay to sleep with my husband? Or how you thought I wouldn't find out?" Emma's breath hitched, and for a moment, Sarah thought she might hang up. But instead, her sister spoke in a shaky voice. "It wasn't like that, Sarah. I never meant to hurt you. It just happened." "It just happened," Sarah repeated, her voice rising with incredulity. "Do you even hear yourself? You're my sister, Emma. You're supposed to have my back, not stab me in it." Her voice cracked as tears spilled down her cheeks, but her anger pushed her forward. How long has this been going on?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line, so long that Sarah thought Emma might not answer. But then she whispered, "A few months. A few months." The words hit Sarah like a punch to the gut. This wasn't a fleeting mistake or a drunken misstep. This was deliberate, calculated. She felt the walls closing in as the betrayal took on a new weight, crushing any remaining hope that this could somehow be undone. Sarah didn't wait for Emma to say anything else. She ended the call and threw her phone onto the bed, her tears falling freely now. She sank to the floor, her head in her hands. The pain was unbearable, but beneath it, a new feeling began to simmer. It was cold, sharp, and relentless. Rage. The night stretched on endlessly, but Sarah didn't sleep. She couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, flashes of Jack and Emma together invaded her mind. Their laughter, their stolen glances, their secret betrayal. It played on an endless loop. She sat by the window, staring out into the rain-soaked darkness, her thoughts spiraling into questions that had no satisfying answers. By morning, exhaustion dulled the edges of her fury, leaving behind a hollow ache. She decided she needed answers, even if they tore her apart further. Confronting Jack again felt inevitable. She walked into the kitchen, where he sat slumped at the table, his head buried in his hands. He looked up as she entered, his eyes bloodshot and filled with regret. For a fleeting moment, Sarah almost felt pity, but the thought of Emma quickly extinguished it. Why her? Sarah's voice was steady, though her hands trembled at her sides. Of all the people in the world, why did it have to be her? Jack exhaled deeply, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I was lonely. You and I were drifting apart, and I was stupid enough to look for something I shouldn't have." Sarah's laugh was bitter. "Lonely? Jack, we've been married for 6 years. We've been through rough patches before, but this?" She shook her head, her voice rising. "You didn't just betray me. You destroyed everything I thought we built together. And Emma? How do you even justify that?" Jack looked down at the table, unable to meet her eyes. "I can't justify it," he admitted. "I'm not asking you to understand, but I made a mistake, Sarah. I never stopped loving you." Sarah's hands curled into fists. "Loving me? You don't hurt the people you love, Jack. And you didn't just hurt me. You humiliated me. You ripped apart my family." Jack stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I know I messed up, okay? I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm begging you to give me another chance. Please, I'll do anything to fix this. Fix this? Sarah's voice cracked, her pain spilling out like a flood. How do you fix something like this, Jack? You can't undo what you did. You can't erase the fact that you chose her over me. Tears streamed down her face as she pointed toward the door. Get out! I can't even look at you right now! Jack hesitated, his expression a mixture of desperation and defeat. Sarah, please! Get out! She shouted, her voice shaking with emotion. Jack finally relented, grabbing his keys and walking toward the door. He paused before stepping out, turning back to look at her one last time. I'm sorry, he said, his voice heavy with regret. And then he was gone. As the door closed behind him, Sarah felt a strange mix of relief and despair. She had taken a stand, but it didn't feel like a victory. Her thoughts turned to Emma again. If Jack's betrayal felt like a dagger to the heart, Emma's felt like it had been twisted. The bond they had shared as twins, the trust and love that should have been unbreakable, was now in ruins. A knock at the door broke her train of thought. For a moment, she wondered if Jack had returned, but when she opened it, she found Emma standing there, her face pale and tear-streaked. We need to talk, Emma said softly. Sarah's jaw tightened as she stepped aside to let her sister in, every muscle in her body screaming to slam the door instead. But she needed to hear what Emma had to say, if only to understand how everything had gone so horribly wrong. The tension in the room was suffocating as Sarah closed the door behind Emma. She didn't offer her sister a seat, nor did she make any effort to hide her anger. Emma stood in the middle of the living room, fidgeting with her hands, her eyes darting nervously around the space as if searching for something to anchor her. But Sarah wasn't about to make this easy. Talk, Sarah said coldly, her arms crossed over her chest. You said you needed to talk, so talk. Explain to me how you could destroy everything. Emma's lips trembled as she opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out at first. She looked at Sarah with pleading eyes, but Sarah's hardened expression didn't waver. Finally, Emma managed. I don't even know where to start. I never wanted this to happen, Sarah. I swear, I didn't. Didn't want this to happen? Sarah's voice was sharp, cutting through Emma's weak explanation. You expect me to believe that? You had months to stop this, Emma. Months. And you didn't. I know, Emma whispered, tears streaming down her face. I know I messed up, and I hate myself for it. I hate that I hurt you. I don't even know why I let it go so far. Don't give me that, Sarah snapped, her voice trembling with fury. You don't get to stand there and act like you're the victim. You knew what you were doing every step of the way. You knew what this would do to me, and you did it anyway, so tell me the truth. Why? Was it jealousy? Spite? What was it? Emma's tears fell harder, and she shook her head, her voice breaking. I don't know. Maybe it was jealousy. Maybe it was just weakness. You've always had everything, Sarah. The perfect husband, the perfect life. And She stopped herself, biting her lip as if she'd already said too much. Sarah stared at her, incredulous. Everything? You think my life is perfect? Do you have any idea what I've been through? What I've sacrificed for this so-called perfect life? And you thought the best way to even the score was to take my husband? Emma's shoulders slumped, as if the weight of her guilt was finally too much to bear. I wasn't trying to take him, she said quietly. I wasn't trying to hurt you. I was lost. And Jack, he made me feel seen. Sarah's stomach turned at Emma's words. Seen? He made you feel seen? Do you hear how selfish that sounds, Emma? You destroyed my marriage because you needed validation? Emma wiped her face with trembling hands. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, Sarah. I don't even expect it. But I'm begging you to believe me when I say I never wanted this to happen. I didn't mean for it to get so far. Please, please don't hate me forever." Sarah's chest heaved as she tried to process her sister's words. The rage inside her hadn't diminished, but now it was tangled with a deep, aching sadness. This wasn't just about Jack's betrayal. It was about Emma, the sister who had been a part of her for as long as she could remember. The person who was supposed to stand by her, not tear her down. "I don't hate you," Sarah said finally, her voice quiet but firm. "But I don't know if I'll ever trust you again. And without trust, what's left?" Emma looked like she wanted to argue, to plead her case further, but she seemed to recognize that nothing she said could fix this. She nodded, tears still streaming, and whispered, "I'm sorry, Sarah. For everything." Sarah didn't respond. She couldn't. Instead, she turned away, her heart heavier than it had ever been, and walked to the kitchen, leaving Emma standing alone in the living room. For the first time in her life, Sarah felt like she had truly lost her sister, and she wasn't sure she could ever find her again. As the door clicked shut behind Emma, Sarah stood in the kitchen, staring blankly at the counter. The weight of the conversation hung in the air like a storm cloud, suffocating her. She thought she'd feel relief once Emma left, but instead, there was a hollow ache, a void where her trust and love for her sister used to be. Her mind kept replaying Emma's words. "I never wanted this to happen. I was lost. Jack made me feel seen." They felt like excuses, flimsy attempts to justify the unforgivable. She poured herself a glass of water, her hands trembling as the tap ran. Each sip felt like it barely made it past the lump in her throat. Her thoughts drifted to Jack's earlier plea for forgiveness. "I'll do anything to fix this." Did he really mean that? Or was it just another desperate attempt to save face? She closed her eyes, trying to imagine what forgiveness would even look like. Would she ever be able to look at Jack and not see betrayal in his eyes? Would she ever be able to stand in the same room as Emma without feeling the crushing weight of their betrayal? The questions spun endlessly, and with no answers in sight, Sarah felt like she was drowning in her own thoughts. Her phone buzzed again, snapping her out of the spiral. It was a message from an old friend, Clara. They hadn't spoken in months. Life had a way of pulling them in different directions, but the timing felt uncanny. "Hey, Sarah, just checking in. It's been a while. How are you?" Sarah hesitated, her fingers hovering over the screen. She could lie, type something simple like, "I'm fine," and move on. But the truth was, she wasn't fine. Not even close. For the first time in what felt like forever, she decided to be honest. "Hey, Clara, I'm not doing great. Can we talk?" She hit send before she could second-guess herself. Clara's reply came almost instantly. "Of course. I'm free now. Call me." Sarah's heart raced as she dialed the number. The moment she heard Clara's warm, familiar voice, the tears came rushing back. She poured everything out: the messages, the betrayal, the confrontation with Jack, and Emma's twisted reasoning. It all spilled out in a torrent of words, raw and unfiltered. Clara listened patiently, her soft hums of acknowledgement the only sound on the other end. When Sarah finally stopped to catch her breath, Clara spoke. "Sarah, I'm so sorry you're going through this. I can't imagine how much it hurts. But you don't have to face this alone. You've always been the strong one, but even the strongest people need support." The words hit Sarah like a wave. She had been so consumed by her pain that she hadn't even considered leaning on anyone else. "I don't even know where to start, Clara. I feel so broken, like I don't know who I am anymore." "You start by taking it one day at a time," Clara said gently, "and by focusing on yourself, not Jack, not Emma, you. What do you need right now? What will help you heal?" Sarah hadn't thought about that. For weeks, her every thought had been consumed by what Jack and Emma had done, by their actions and their words. But Clara was right. It was time to think about herself, for the first time in a long time. Maybe I need space, Sarah said, her voice steadier now. From both of them. From everything. Then take it, Clara encouraged. You don't owe anyone your time or energy right now. This is about you. Take as much time as you need to figure out what you want. As the call ended, Sarah felt a small flicker of clarity amidst the chaos. She didn't have all the answers yet, but for the first time since her world fell apart, she felt like she had a starting point. It was time to stop looking back at the wreckage and start thinking about what came next. And whatever that was, it had to be on her terms. The days that followed were quiet, but heavy. Sarah had blocked Jack's number and avoided Emma's attempts to reach out. Her house, once a place of comfort, felt like a cage, filled with memories that haunted her at every turn. She couldn't even walk into the living room without seeing Jack sitting on the couch, laughing at some stupid joke she'd told. The kitchen was no better. Every drawer, every mug, felt like a reminder of what they used to be. She decided she needed to escape. Not forever, but long enough to clear her head. Clara's words echoed in her mind, "Take space. Focus on yourself." It was advice Sarah had clung to like a lifeline. She packed a small bag, grabbed her car keys, and left without telling anyone where she was going. She didn't even have a clear destination, just a desperate need to leave behind the suffocating weight of her home. The road stretched out in front of her, winding through fields and small towns she barely noticed. Hours later, she found herself at a quiet lakeside inn. The place was simple, with a handful of cozy cabins nestled among tall pine trees. It wasn't luxurious, but it was peaceful, and for the first time in weeks, Sarah felt like she could breathe. Her days at the inn passed slowly, marked by long walks along the lake and evenings spent journaling by the fire. At first, the silence felt oppressive, amplifying her thoughts and emotions. But gradually, it became comforting, a space where she could untangle the mess in her head. She began to rediscover pieces of herself she'd forgotten in the chaos of her marriage. She doodled in her journal like she used to in college, sketched the view of the lake, and even tried her hand at writing poetry, though it was clumsy and full of crossed-out lines. One morning, as she sat by the lake, Sarah found herself staring at her reflection in the water. The face looking back at her was familiar but different. Tired eyes, a trace of sadness in her expression, but also a flicker of resilience she hadn't noticed before. For the first time, she asked herself a question she had been avoiding. What do I want? She thought about Jack. She thought about Emma. But mostly, she thought about herself. The girl she used to be before betrayal turned her world upside down. She wanted to find that girl again. Not for Jack, not for anyone else. For her. The next day, Sarah decided to do something she hadn't done in years. Rent a kayak. As she paddled across the calm, glassy surface of the lake, she felt a strange sense of freedom. The water rippled gently under her kayak, the trees stood tall and steady on the shore, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she wasn't thinking about Jack or Emma. She was just present. When she returned to the cabin that evening, her phone buzzed with a notification. She had almost forgotten it existed, tucked away in the bottom of her bag. She hesitated before picking it up, bracing herself for yet another message from Jack or Emma. But it wasn't them. It was Clara. "How are you holding up? Miss you." A small smile tugged at Sarah's lips as she typed back, "Better. I think I'm finding my way." It wasn't a lie. For the first time since the betrayal, Sarah felt like she was reclaiming her life, piece by piece. She wasn't healed, not yet, but she was starting to believe that healing was possible. And that was enough to keep her going. As Sarah's days at the inn turned into a week, she began to notice subtle changes in herself. The anger that had once consumed her began to settle into something quieter, still present, but less volatile. She wasn't ready to forgive, not by a long shot, but she felt a growing sense of clarity about what she deserved. One evening, as she sat on the cabin's porch with a cup of tea, her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Clara. It was an email from Jack. The subject line read, "Please read this." She stared at it for what felt like an eternity, debating whether to open it. Every instinct screamed at her to delete it, to ignore him, but curiosity got the better of her. She clicked on it, her heart pounding. The message was long, filled with Jack's typical over-explaining, but one line caught her attention. "I've started therapy. I know it doesn't erase what I've done, but I need to understand why I let myself ruin everything." She read it twice, her emotions a tangled mess of skepticism and faint, grudging respect. Therapy Jack had always been the kind of man who believed he could solve any problem on his own, so the idea of him admitting he needed help was surprising. But Sarah wasn't ready to let her guard down. Words were easy. Actions were harder. The email ended with a plea. "I won't bother you again if you don't want me to, but I'm begging you to meet me one last time. I need to say things to your face that I can't put into words here. You deserve that much." Sarah closed the email and set her phone aside, her mind racing. Part of her wanted to delete it and never look back. She had made progress in the past week. Why risk reopening the wounds? But another part of her felt the pull of unfinished business. Could she really move forward without confronting the man who had shattered her trust? The next morning, Sarah decided to call Clara. She needed someone to talk her through this. As the phone rang, she paced the length of the cabin, her nerves fraying with every second. When Clara picked up, her warm voice instantly steadied Sarah. "Hey, how's the lake life treating you?"
"It's helping," Sarah admitted. "But Jack emailed me. He says he's in therapy and wants to meet." There was a pause on the other end. Then Clara said, "How do you feel about that?" "I don't know," Sarah confessed. "Part of me wants to tell him to go to hell, but another part, I feel like I need closure, like I need to hear whatever he has to say, even if it doesn't change anything." Clara's tone was thoughtful. "Closure is important, Sarah. But so is protecting yourself. If you're going to meet him, make sure it's on your terms. Don't let him control the narrative. This is about you, not him." Sarah nodded, even though Clara couldn't see her. "You're right. If I do this, it's for me, not for him." Later that day, Sarah replied to Jack's email. Her message was short and to the point. "I'll meet you, but this doesn't mean anything. I need to say my piece, and I'll listen to yours. That's all." Jack's reply came quickly, almost too quickly, as if he had been waiting for her response. He suggested a cafe in the city, a neutral place where they could talk without the weight of their shared home looming over them. Sarah agreed, but as she closed her laptop, a knot of anxiety formed in her stomach. She had no idea what she would say when she saw him again, or how she would feel. The date was set for 2 days later. Until then, Sarah focused on grounding herself. She spent her remaining time at the lake journaling, walking, and reminding herself that this meeting wasn't about fixing the past. It was about freeing herself from it. Whatever Jack said, whatever he wanted, Sarah knew one thing for sure. She was no longer the same woman who had been shattered by his betrayal. She was stronger now, and she was ready to face him. The day of the meeting arrived, and Sarah found herself standing outside the cafe, her heart pounding in her chest. The bustling noise of the city felt distant, muted by her own nervous thoughts. She adjusted her coat, taking a deep breath before stepping inside. The cafe was warm and inviting, the scent of freshly brewed coffee hanging in the air, but Sarah barely noticed. Her eyes scanned the room until they landed on Jack, sitting at a corner table, his hands clasped tightly around a cup. He looked up as she approached, his face a mixture of relief and nervousness. He stood, his movements hesitant, and offered a small, almost apologetic smile. "Sarah," he said softly, as if afraid his voice would shatter the fragile moment. She nodded, keeping her expression neutral, and sat down across from him. "Let's get this over with," she said, her tone sharper than she intended. She wasn't here for pleasantries, she was here for answers. Jack sat back down, his hands still gripping the cup. "Thank you for coming," he began. "I know I don't deserve it, but I needed to see you. I needed to say this face to face." Sarah folded her arms, waiting. She wasn't going to make this easy for him. He took a deep breath, his eyes darting to the table before meeting hers. "I've been seeing a therapist, like I said, and it's made me realize just how much I messed up. Not just with what I did, but in how I treated you before any of this happened. I took you for granted, Sarah. I didn't see how much you gave to our relationship while I just coasted." Sarah's jaw tightened, but she didn't interrupt. She wanted to hear him out, even if it felt like ripping open a barely healed wound. "I was selfish," he continued. "I let my own insecurities and weaknesses cloud my judgment. And when things got hard between us, instead of facing it, I ran. I looked for comfort in the wrong place. And I hate myself for it." Sarah leaned forward, her voice cold but steady. "You didn't just run, Jack. You ran straight to my sister. Do you even realize how deep that cut? You didn't just betray me. You betrayed everything we built and the bond I had with Emma. You destroyed 2 relationships in one careless act." Jack flinched at her words, his guilt written all over his face. "I know," he said quietly, "and I hate that I did that to you, to both of you. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know how sorry I am. I can't take back what I did, but I'm trying to understand why I did it and how to be better." Sarah stared at him, her emotions churning. Part of her wanted to believe him, to believe that he was genuinely trying to change. But another part, the part still raw from the pain he caused, wasn't ready to let go of her anger. "Sorry doesn't fix this, Jack," she said. "You don't just get to apologize and hope it all goes away. You broke me. You broke us, and you broke my family. How do you expect me to move past that?" "I don't," Jack admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I just wanted you to know that I'm trying to be better, for myself, and for the future. Whether or not you're part of that future, that's up to you." Sarah let his words hang in the air, her mind racing. She had come here for closure, not answers, and Jack's admission left her feeling both vindicated and hollow. She had wanted him to acknowledge the depth of his betrayal, and he had. But it didn't make the pain disappear. She stood, pushing her chair back. "I'm glad you're working on yourself, Jack. I really am. But I can't be part of this anymore. I need to move forward, and I can't do that if I'm still tied to the past." Jack looked up at her, his face crumpling with regret. "I understand," he said softly. I hope you find happiness, Sarah. You deserve it." She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Goodbye, Jack." And with that, she walked out of the cafe, her steps steady and purposeful. As she stepped into the crisp air outside, she felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time, she wasn't carrying the weight of what he had done. She had said her piece, and now it was time to reclaim her life. The cool air outside the cafe felt sharp against Sarah's skin, but it also felt cleansing, as if it carried away some of the heaviness that had clung to her for weeks. She walked briskly, weaving through the busy city streets, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. Jack's words replayed in her head, not because she doubted her decision, but because they confirmed what she had suspected all along. He had been broken long before their marriage started to crack. As she approached her car, she paused, resting her hands on the roof as she stared at her reflection in the window. Her face was pale, her eyes still red from the tension of the meeting, but there was something else there. Resolve. For so long, she had been living in the shadow of Jack's betrayal and Emma's selfishness. Now, for the first time, she felt like she had stepped out of that shadow, even if the light was still dim. The drive back to the inn was quiet, save for the hum of the engine and the occasional honk of distant traffic.
Sarah let herself process everything that had happened. Jack's remorse had seemed genuine, but that didn't change what he had done. She couldn't build a future on ruins. What surprised her more was how calm she felt. She had expected the meeting to leave her shattered again, but instead, it felt like a closing chapter. Painful, yes, but also necessary. Back at the inn, Sarah sank into the armchair by the fireplace, the warmth of the flames comforting her. She pulled out her journal, which had become a lifeline during her time away, and began to write. The words came easily, flowing from her pen like a release. I thought closure would mean fixing what was broken. I thought it would mean finding a way to forgive, to understand, to make peace with the people who hurt me. But I realize now that closure isn't about them. It's about me. It's about letting go of the hurt, the anger, and the questions that will never have satisfying answers. It's about choosing myself over the past. As she wrote, Sarah felt lighter. The knot in her chest that had been there since the day she discovered the betrayal began to loosen. She didn't have to have all the answers. She didn't have to forgive Jack or Emma right now, or ever. What mattered was that she was moving forward, one step at a time. Later that evening, as the sky darkened and the stars began to peek through the clouds, Sarah sat on the porch of her cabin, sipping tea and watching the stillness of the lake. Her phone buzzed on the table beside her. For a moment, she considered ignoring it, but curiosity got the better of her. When she picked it up, she saw a text from Clara. "Proud of you. You're stronger than you know." A small smile tugged at her lips. Clara didn't know the details of what had happened at the cafe, but she had been Sarah's rock through all of this. Sarah replied, "Thank you. I think I'm starting to believe it too." The stars above seemed brighter than usual, and for the first time in weeks, Sarah felt a glimmer of hope. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure. It would be hers to define. No Jack, no Emma, no ghosts of betrayal. Just her, carving out a life that she could call her own. She leaned back in her chair, letting the night wrap around her like a blanket, and breathed deeply. It wasn't the end, it was a new beginning. The next morning, Sarah woke up to the soft chirping of birds outside her cabin window. The lake shimmered under the early sunlight, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of calm as she stretched and sat up. Today felt different. There was no heaviness in her chest, no immediate thought of Jack or Emma to sour the day. Instead, there was a quiet determination, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, she was ready to start rebuilding. After breakfast, she decided to take a walk by the lake. The cool breeze carried the scent of pine, and the rhythmic lapping of the water against the shore was soothing. As she strolled, she found herself thinking not about the betrayal or the pain, but about the possibilities ahead. She thought about the things she had set aside over the years, the hobbies she once loved, the dreams she'd put on hold to support Jack and their life together. For too long, she had prioritized others at the expense of herself. That was going to change. Sarah returned to the cabin and opened her laptop, which she had barely touched since arriving at the inn. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she hesitated, unsure of where to begin. But then she opened a search engine and typed in a few words. Art classes near me. Art had always been her passion, but life had gotten in the way. College, work, marriage, they had all pulled her away from the sketchbooks and paintbrushes that once brought her so much joy. She scrolled through the results and found a studio offering beginner and intermediate classes in a town not far from where she lived. Without overthinking, she signed up for the next available session. Her heart raced as she hit the confirmation button, but it wasn't anxiety this time. It was excitement. She was taking a step toward something new, something just for her. She made a promise to herself. No more living for other people's expectations. This was her time to rediscover who she was, to rebuild a life that felt authentic and fulfilling. The rest of the day passed in a blur of small but meaningful steps.
She called Clara to share her decision, and Clara's enthusiasm was contagious. "That's amazing, Sarah. I'm so proud of you. You're finally doing something for yourself." By evening, Sarah felt lighter than she had in months. She stood on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the lake with hues of orange and pink. She thought about Jack's remorse and Emma's tears, but this time, they didn't consume her. They were part of her story, but they didn't define it. For the first time, she felt like she had turned the page to a new chapter. It wouldn't be easy, and there would still be hard days ahead. But as she stood there, bathed in the soft glow of twilight, she realized that she had something she hadn't had in a long time. Hope. A hope that her life wasn't over, that she wasn't broken beyond repair. She was still standing, still breathing, still capable of joy. And that was enough. The following week, Sarah returned home from the lake, feeling a cautious sense of renewal. Her house, once a suffocating reminder of betrayal, now felt like a blank canvas. She stepped through the door and stood in the silence, taking in the space. Everything was still in its place. The furniture, the framed photos, the little knickknacks that told the story of her life with Jack. But something had shifted. It wasn't the house that felt different. It was her. She spent the first day unpacking and rearranging, determined to make the space her own again. The wedding photos came down first. It wasn't an act of anger, but one of reclaiming. She carefully placed them in a box, alongside other reminders of a life she was ready to move beyond. She didn't throw them away. That wasn't who she was. But she didn't need them staring back at her every day either. By the time she finished, her home felt lighter. She added small touches, a vase of fresh flowers on the dining table, a colorful throw blanket draped over the couch. They were little things, but they made a big difference. The house no longer felt like a monument to the past. It was starting to feel like her sanctuary. Sarah threw herself into her new art class with a determination she hadn't felt in years. On the first day, she arrived early, her sketchbook tucked under her arm. The studio was small but inviting, with soft lighting and walls lined with student artwork. As she settled into her seat, she felt a nervous excitement bubbling in her chest. The instructor, a warm and enthusiastic woman named Lisa, welcomed everyone with a smile. "Art is about expression," she said. "It's about letting go of perfection and finding joy in the process." Sarah felt those words resonate deeply. She wasn't looking for perfection. She was looking for herself. As the weeks went by, Sarah found solace in the studio. She lost herself in the vibrant swirls of paint, the delicate lines of her sketches, and the quiet hum of creativity that filled the room. Each piece she created felt like a small victory, a reminder that she was still capable of beauty and growth. Outside the studio, she began to rebuild her routines. She started going for morning runs, enjoying the crisp air and the way it cleared her mind. She spent time with Clara, who encouraged her every step of the way, and even reconnected with a few old friends she had lost touch with over the years. One evening, as Sarah sat on her couch, scrolling through her phone, a message from Emma appeared. It was short and tentative. "I hope you're doing okay. I miss you." Sarah stared at the screen for a long moment, her emotions swirling. She didn't reply. Not yet. She wasn't ready. Forgiveness, she realized, was a process, not a moment. And while she might get there someday, she wasn't going to rush herself. For now, she needed to focus on the life she was rebuilding, one step at a time. As she set her phone down, a sense of peace washed over her. Her journey wasn't over. There were still challenges ahead, and the scars of betrayal would always be a part of her story. But they didn't define her anymore. She had chosen herself, and that choice had opened a door to a future filled with possibility. That night, as Sarah climbed into bed, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Contentment. She had weathered the storm, and now
She was standing in the light of her own resilience. And for the first time, she knew she was going to be okay. In the months that followed, Sarah's life began to take on a new rhythm, one that felt entirely her own. Her days were filled with small joys, the smell of fresh coffee in the morning, the way the sun streamed through her kitchen window, and the satisfaction of seeing her art slowly evolve with each class. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. Her art had become more than just a hobby. It was a way to process everything she had been through, a medium to express the emotions she couldn't put into words. One evening, Lisa, her art instructor, approached her after class. "Sarah, I've been noticing your work," she said with a warm smile. "There's so much emotion in it, so much depth. Have you ever thought about showcasing it?" Sarah blinked, caught off guard. "Showcasing? You mean, like, in an exhibit?" Lisa nodded. "We're hosting a small community art show next month. It's a great opportunity to share your work. I think it would resonate with a lot of people." The idea terrified Sarah, but it also intrigued her. Sharing her art felt vulnerable, like peeling back the layers she had so carefully rebuilt. But it also felt empowering. Maybe it was time to let the world see who she was becoming. "I'll think about it," she said, her heart pounding at the possibility. That night, as she worked on a new piece, Sarah found herself pouring her soul into the canvas. The strokes were bold and unapologetic, the colors vibrant and alive. It wasn't just a painting, it was a reflection of her journey, from the depths of betrayal to the strength she had found within herself. A week later, Sarah emailed Lisa to confirm her participation in the exhibit. It was a leap of faith, but one she was ready to take. The weeks leading up to the show were a blur of preparation, and when the day finally arrived, Sarah stood in the gallery, her heart racing as visitors milled about, admiring the artwork. Her piece, titled Resilience, hung in the center of the room. It was a swirling mix of blues, yellows, and fiery reds, capturing the chaos and beauty of her transformation. People stopped to look, some lingering, others nodding appreciatively. Sarah stood nearby, her nerves on edge, but her pride unmistakable. Toward the end of the evening, a woman approached her. She looked to be in her mid-30s, her expression kind but serious. "Is this your work?" she asked, gesturing to the painting. Sarah nodded, her voice steady. "It is." The woman smiled faintly. "It's powerful. It feels raw, but also hopeful. It reminds me of something I've been through. Thank you for sharing it." Those words stayed with Sarah long after the show ended. It wasn't just about the art. It was about connection, about the way her story could resonate with others. She realized then that her pain had become something more than just a burden. It had become a source of strength, a way to help others find their own resilience. That night, as she stood in front of her painting one last time, Sarah felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, not for the betrayal, but for the journey it had set her on. She was no longer the woman who had been broken by Jack and Emma's actions. She was someone new, someone stronger, someone who had rebuilt her life on her own terms. And as she walked out of the gallery, her head held high, she knew this was only the beginning of the life she was meant to live. The weeks following the art exhibit brought a sense of momentum to Sarah's life that she hadn't felt in years. Her piece, Resilience, garnered unexpected attention, sparking conversations and even a few inquiries from local art enthusiasts. While she hadn't set out to make a career out of her work, the recognition was validating. It wasn't about fame. It was about finding her voice and knowing it mattered. One afternoon, as she sipped tea by the window, Sarah received a call from Lisa. "I have some exciting news," Lisa began, her voice brimming with enthusiasm. "A local gallery is hosting a themed exhibit on personal transformation, and they've asked if you'd contribute a few pieces." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. "They want me?" she asked, still not used to the idea of her work being sought after.
They do, Lisa confirmed. And I think this is a wonderful opportunity for you. Your story, your art. It resonates with people. Sarah agreed, though the idea both thrilled and intimidated her. Over the next few weeks, she threw herself into her work, creating pieces that reflected her journey of healing, self-discovery, and growth. Each canvas was a chapter of her story. The raw pain of betrayal, the quiet solitude of reflection, and the vibrant energy of renewal. By the time she finished, she felt as though she had poured every ounce of herself into her art. The gallery opening was a grander affair than the community show, with a larger crowd and more polished presentation. Sarah stood among the attendees, listening as people murmured about her pieces, each comment a reminder that her pain had found purpose. Toward the end of the evening, Clara arrived, beaming with pride. "Look at you," she said, pulling Sarah into a hug. "This is incredible. You've turned something so painful into something so beautiful." Sarah smiled, her eyes misty. "I couldn't have done it without you. You reminded me that I was worth saving." Clara shook her head. "You saved yourself, Sarah. I just cheered you on." As the night wound down, Sarah felt a strange sense of closure, not just with the art, but with everything that had happened. She no longer felt tethered to the betrayal or defined by it. Jack and Emma were no longer the central figures in her story. They were merely footnotes in a much larger narrative. The next morning, Sarah woke up to a clear sky and a renewed sense of purpose. She decided to take a walk in the park near her home, a place she had avoided since everything fell apart. As she strolled along the tree-lined paths, she realized how far she had come. The woman who had stood frozen in the kitchen, clutching Jack's phone and feeling her world crumble, was a distant memory. She had rebuilt herself from the ground up, and while the scars remained, they no longer weighed her down. As she sat on a bench, watching children play and leaves rustle in the breeze, her phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Emma. "I know I've said this before, but I'm truly sorry. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know I miss you every day." Sarah stared at the screen, her emotions a mixture of sadness and understanding. She didn't feel anger anymore, only a quiet acknowledgement of what had been lost. She didn't reply right away. Instead, she leaned back and closed her eyes, letting the warmth of the sun wash over her. She wasn't ready to reopen that door. Not yet, and maybe not ever. But she wasn't burdened by it anymore. Forgiveness, she realized, wasn't about absolving someone else. It was about freeing herself. And in that moment, Sarah knew she had finally found peace. Months passed, and Sarah's life settled into a steady rhythm, one she had built entirely for herself. Her art continued to gain recognition, leading to small opportunities she never expected, teaching a beginner's class at a local community center, collaborating on a mural project, and even selling a few pieces. Each step felt like a reaffirmation of her growth, a reminder that she was capable of building a fulfilling life beyond the shadows of her past. One evening, as she worked on a new painting in her home studio, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. She hesitated before opening it, a faint unease settling over her. The message read, "Sarah, it's Emma. I've been thinking about you and hope we can talk soon. I understand if you're not ready, but I'll wait as long as it takes." Sarah put the phone down, her chest tightening. Emma's messages had become less frequent over time, but every few months, there would be another olive branch, another attempt to reconnect. Each time, Sarah felt conflicted. Part of her wanted to respond, to confront the lingering questions that had haunted her since the betrayal. But another part feared opening old wounds, feared that revisiting the pain would undo the progress she had made. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying memories of her childhood with Emma, their laughter, their inside jokes, their bond that had once felt unbreakable. It was impossible to reconcile those memories with the woman who had betrayed her. Yet,
She couldn't deny the ache in her heart, the part of her that missed her sister, despite everything. The next morning, Sarah decided to write a letter. Not a text, not a call. Something tangible. Something she could pour her emotions into without the pressure of an immediate response. She sat at her desk, pen in hand, and began. Emma, I've thought about this moment so many times, but the words never seem to come. Even now, I don't know if I can fully express how your betrayal shattered me. You weren't just my sister. You were my other half, my confidant, the one person I thought I could always trust. Losing you was like losing a part of myself. She paused, her hand trembling as tears blurred her vision. She took a deep breath and continued. But as much as it hurt, I've come to realize that holding on to the pain only keeps me stuck in the past. I'm not ready to forgive, not completely. But I also don't want to carry this burden forever. I don't know what our relationship will look like moving forward, or if we can ever truly repair it. But I want you to know I'm open to trying, on my terms, at my pace. Sarah folded the letter and slipped it into an envelope. She didn't send it immediately, unsure if she even would. But writing it felt like another step toward healing, a way to release the lingering anger and sadness that had held her back. The next day, Sarah returned to her usual routine, feeling a sense of lightness she hadn't expected. She didn't need immediate answers or resolution. She had learned that healing wasn't a straight line, but a journey, one she was navigating with grace and resilience. Weeks later, she mailed the letter. It wasn't a declaration of forgiveness or a promise of reconciliation. It was an opening, a chance for Emma to prove, over time, that she was worthy of trust again. Whether Emma took that chance or not was beyond Sarah's control. What mattered was that Sarah had made peace with herself, and for the first time, she felt truly free. The days after mailing the letter brought a mix of emotions for Sarah: relief, apprehension, and a lingering uncertainty about what might come next. But she didn't let herself dwell on it. Instead, she focused on the life she was building, immersing herself in her art, her friendships, and the small joys she had rediscovered. A few weeks later, an envelope arrived in the mail. The handwriting on the front was unmistakably Emma's, careful and slightly slanted. Sarah stared at it for a long moment, her heart pounding. She wasn't sure if she was ready to read whatever Emma had written, but she also knew she couldn't ignore it. She sat at the dining table, the letter in her hands, and slowly opened it. Sarah, it began. I don't even know where to start. Thank you for your letter. I wasn't sure if I'd ever hear from you again, and I wouldn't have blamed you if I didn't. Your words hit me harder than I expected. Not because I didn't know I hurt you, but because seeing it written out made it impossible to avoid the reality of what I did. I broke your trust, and I broke our bond. There's no excuse for that. Sarah's eyes skimmed over the lines, her chest tightening as she read. I've spent so much time reflecting on my actions and the choices that led me to hurt you. I let my jealousy, my insecurities, and my selfishness take over. And in doing so, I ruined the most important relationship in my life. You have every right to keep me out of yours. But if there's any chance for us to rebuild, even slowly, I want to try. I miss you, Sarah. I miss my sister. And I will spend the rest of my life trying to earn back even a fraction of your trust. Emma ended the letter simply. Whatever you decide, I'll respect it. But please know I'm here, and I'm ready to do whatever it takes to make things right. Sarah set the letter down, her hands trembling. The sincerity in Emma's words was clear, but so was the enormity of what had happened. Trust wasn't something that could be rebuilt overnight, and she wasn't sure if it ever could. But for the first time, Sarah felt a tiny crack in the wall she had built around her heart, a cautious openness to the possibility of something new. Over the next few days, Sarah found herself thinking deeply about Emma's letter. She didn't feel rushed to respond.
She had learned through her journey that healing took time, and any steps toward reconciliation would need to be on her terms. She spoke to Clara about it one evening over coffee, her friend listening patiently.
I think she's genuine, Sarah admitted. But it doesn't erase what she did. I don't know if I can ever trust her fully again. Clara nodded thoughtfully. It's okay if you can't. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean everything has to go back to the way it was. It's about what feels right for you. Sarah appreciated Clara's wisdom, and that night, she sat with her journal, writing out her thoughts and feelings. She realized she didn't need to decide anything immediately. Emma's letter was a step forward, but it didn't obligate her to rush into anything. For now, Sarah would focus on what brought her peace and happiness. In the days that followed, Sarah continued to grow into her new life. She painted more, taught more classes, and even began planning her own small art exhibit. She didn't reply to Emma's letter right away, but she didn't close the door completely either. She kept it on her desk, a reminder that while the past couldn't be undone, the future was still unwritten, and it was hers to shape. Sarah had learned one thing above all else. Healing wasn't about fixing what was broken. It was about finding the strength to move forward, no matter what. And she was doing just that, one day at a time. Months passed, and life began to feel fuller, richer, and more grounded for Sarah. She threw herself into her art and community projects, taking on more responsibilities at the art center where she had started teaching. Her classes were a source of joy, not just for her students, but for herself. Every smile, every moment of shared creativity reminded her of how far she had come. One evening, as she prepared for an upcoming art exhibit, her phone buzzed with a familiar name. It was Emma. This time, instead of a message, it was a call. Sarah hesitated, her finger hovering over the screen. She hadn't spoken to Emma since the letter, and though she had thought about reaching out, she hadn't taken the step. Finally, she exhaled deeply and answered. "Hello?" she said, her voice steady but cautious. "Sarah," Emma's voice came through, soft and uncertain. "I hope this isn't a bad time." Sarah paused, letting the words settle before replying. "No, it's fine. What's on your mind?" There was a brief silence on the other end before Emma spoke again. I wanted to thank you for the letter. It meant more to me than I can say. And I wanted to ask if you'd be willing to meet. I know I don't have the right to ask, but I'd like to see you. No pressure. Just whenever you're ready." The vulnerability in Emma's voice was evident, and it tugged at something deep within Sarah. She had built so much distance between them, fortified her boundaries so carefully, but Emma's persistence and remorse felt genuine. Sarah knew she didn't owe her sister anything, but perhaps it was time to see for herself if the person Emma claimed to be now was real. "I'll think about it," Sarah said carefully, "but I'm not making any promises." "Of course," Emma replied quickly. "Take all the time you need. I miss you, Sarah." The call ended shortly after, and Sarah sat for a long while, staring at her phone. She felt conflicted, but not in the same overwhelming way she had months ago. It was a quieter uncertainty, one tempered by the strength she had found in herself. She didn't feel rushed or pressured. She had control over the pace of this process, and that made all the difference. The next day, Sarah brought up the conversation with Clara during one of their regular coffee meetups. "She wants to meet," Sarah said, stirring her drink absent-mindedly. "I'm not sure if I'm ready, or if I even want to." Clara leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. "It's a big decision, but it doesn't have to be all or nothing. Meeting her doesn't mean you're forgiving her completely or letting her back into your life. It just means you're open to hearing her out in person." Sarah nodded slowly. "I guess I'm just scared. What if it stirs everything up again? What if I regret it?" "Then you stop," Clara said firmly. You've done so much work to rebuild your life, Sarah. You've proven to yourself that you're strong enough to handle anything. If it doesn't feel right, you walk away. You have that power. Over the next few days, Sarah gave the idea more thought. She knew she couldn't erase what Emma had done, but maybe facing her sister could provide another layer of closure, or clarity at the very least. Eventually, she sent Emma a message. Let's meet. Coffee next week. My terms. Emma's response came almost immediately, expressing gratitude and nervous excitement. Sarah felt a small sense of relief. This was her choice, and whatever came of it, she knew she could handle it. She had already faced the worst, and she had come out stronger on the other side. As the meeting approached, Sarah reminded herself that this wasn't about fixing the past. It was about stepping into the future with clear eyes and an open heart, ready for whatever lay ahead. Whether or not Emma would truly be part of that future remained to be seen, but Sarah was finally ready to find out.